Well, Jeremiah sounds a little burnt out, doesn't he? Tell you what, we'll get back to that. First, I've got a story. In a previous congregation I was at, we would spend a week each summer at Bible camp with the confirmation students. It was just part of the program there. And usually there'd be a lot of fun and games and Bible studies and songs and wildlife, birds and rabbits and like the occasional deer if we were lucky. Some really cool things. Well, one year our group was out in the field, which was just an open area for games and running around. And it was a little bit separated from the camp. There was like kind of the main camp grounds with like the dining hall and the cabins and a couple other buildings. And then there was like, a little wooded area and a little walk through that. And then you would get to the field. So anyway, one day we were out in this field playing games and everything like that. And we saw a bear. Yeah. Now, it was a ways away. It was kind of like at the edge of the wooded area, and we were kind of on the far side of the field. But it is a bear. And there were no, vehicles out there. We had just walked out there. Or really any, buildings to go into or anything like that. So we were just there. Me with, a bunch of these students. And we just kind of watched and waited. Well, the bear, passed by and went on its way, and we eventually made our way back to the main camp. On the way there, one of the students turned to me and asked, should we keep this to ourselves? Should we not tell anyone? I don't know what inspired that. Maybe some concern that things might, get shut down or they'd have to go home or, there's some sort of trouble feeling there. Or maybe they thought I should or might want to, just kind of handle it with the leadership staff at the camp, just handle it quietly so no one else would need to be worried or concerned about it. And any of those could have been the reason, and any of those can be a response. To something like that happening, something bad or scary or uncomfortable is out there. And once we're kind of past whatever that is, let's just act like it's not, keep it covered up. Don't talk about it. It's for the official people to handle, not us. So we'll just stay quiet. That story is immediately what came to mind when I read the gospel lesson for today. Jesus tells the disciples that they are to go and proclaim the message even when it's hard or scary or uncomfortable, even when other people are going to try to shut them down or kick them out. Jesus says, don't be afraid. You are valued and important and called to do this. It's not going to be easy because it's change. But as we mentioned last week, that's the gospel. It changes things. It changes the world. It transforms the world. It can't be the same once the gospel has reached it. And change, will be met with resistance. But again, that's what grace does. It changes things. It changes us. And this whole not peace but a sword concept, that seems to echo another concept called costly grace, which is kind of tied to all this too. The concept of costly grace is one that acknowledges that grace, first of all, was costly. It cost Jesus. It cost Jesus everything. And we cannot and should not cheapen that by being dismissive of what that grace does for us and for our world. We have to act accordingly, even when it costs us. It is, after all, costly grace. Now, the opposite of that, or kind of the other side of that coin, is cheap grace, right? Cheap grace is the idea that I'm forgiven, so I can do whatever because God will forgive whatever. Well, at best, that's reducing that precious and costly gift to an intellectual exercise. At worst, it's an intentional and maybe a little bit manipulative of that gift. Grace is free. Grace is for all. But grace is not and was not cheap. And we shouldn't cheapen it. There are people out there doing really hard work to make the world a better place. And I think a question for us is, how can we support them? Jeremiah sounds a little burnt out. See, I said we'd kind of come back to that. Do you know who else hits their breaking point? Moses, Elijah, Jonah. Yeah, this is not an easy task at all. There's something to this, though. I wonder for these individuals how much, that breaking point could have been avoided if they had some others to share with sooner, or if they had shared with others sooner. Moses actually does get better when he gets some help, some assistance, actually. 70 people are appointed to help carry his workload. Think about that. 70 people to help carry his workload. He had all of that on him. Elijah gets a few students to support him as well and to continue the work. Jonah gets to just talk it out. And even Jeremiah comes around to a word of hope after he kind of gets through this part and lets this all out too. There are people out there doing really hard work to make the world a better place, to change the world for the better. How can we support them? There are scary things out there. There are uncomfortable things to address, and we can't just pretend they're not there. And we can't leave them for someone else to deal with either. Or worse, to just, venture out there and discover them without realizing that they're out there. Should we just keep it to ourselves? Should we just let others take their chance? Should we not tell anyone? My immediate response to those students who asked about the bear was, I think you should tell everyone. Now, one, this was their I saw a bear story, and they get to have that. And two, on a more serious note, the staff and the other campers needed to know so that they could help address it and contact whoever else they needed to help address that. And so no one did get caught out there alone without knowing about that situation. So we walked back to the main campsite, and I went straight to the dining hall to find the camp director. As we went, the students kind of in their cabin groups, went to find their counselors once we got back to the main camp. And everything was fine. And I just went straight to the dining hall, and I walked in the door, and the camp director came and met me, there. And before I could say anything, the camp director just said, "So I hear you saw a bear." The camp director already knew, and I didn't stop anywhere. Talk about the power of a good story, the power of proclamation, the power of just telling everyone. We have a pretty good story too.